In May of 1940, the Allied forces had been pushed to the beaches of Dunkirk, France. Trapped with nowhere to go, close to 400,000 troops waited for evacuation as dive bombers attacked, and German U-boats picked off whatever ships answered their distress calls. In these moments of desperation came unbelievable acts of courage. The Royal Navy, along with 850 private civilian boats, came to rescue them. In the end, over 338,000 troops were evacuated and brought back to England. But what if these ships never came? Welcome back to Curiosity, and today we'll be discussing exactly that. What if the Dunkirk evacuation failed? What would it mean for England? Would they still have been victorious? We're talking all that and more, so stay tuned. First off, why did the Dunkirk evacuation happen? Let's do a quick overview. In September of 1939, Germany invaded Poland, sparking World War II. By May of 1940, the Germans moved into France. It was here the British Expeditionary Force, or BEF, were pushed back to the port of Dunkirk alongside French and Belgian troops. At the command of Winston Churchill, who had only been Prime Minister of Britain for a couple of weeks, the Royal Navy was ordered to sail to Dunkirk and rescue whatever troops they could. From here, Operation Dynamo was launched. Due to the strength of the Germans, they had only expected to rescue between 20 to 30,000 men. The evacuation lasted from the 26th of May to the 4th of June. That's 9 days of endless anxiety and suspense. During its beginning stages, troops left the port at a very slow pace, with only 7,600 getting out on the first day. During this period, the German Luftwaffe picked them off from the air. By the end of the evacuation, their aircraft had dropped thousands of bombs, killing both soldiers and civilians. By the end of the evacuation, both the BEF and French military suffered 68,000 casualties. This includes 3,500 killed and another 13,000 wounded. Most of the artillery was either lost or abandoned. Among the ships dispatched to help with the evacuation, 3 French and 6 British were destroyed by either bombings or torpedoes. In regards to the civilian boats, these were referred to as the little ships of Dunkirk. These included fishing boats, yachts, and simple lifeboats. Not only did they sail from England, but also France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. By the 4th of June, over 336,000 soldiers were rescued and transported back to England. What started out as a desperate effort to rescue tens of thousands ended up in a miracle, saving hundreds of thousands. This was considered a massive turning point in the war. It was at this point that hope for the Allies was restored. But what if the operation failed? What then? The BEF could very well have been wiped out within the 9 days of the evacuation. German panzer divisions were breaking through by the day. The only thing holding them back were the French military who remained on guard around the port of Dunkirk. If the French had been taken out, the panzers, along with the Luftwaffe bombers, would have killed off most, if not all, of the British army. While Hitler had a strong military, it was not made of invincible men. With the invasion of France beginning on May 10th, the German Wehrmacht had been fighting non-stop for close to 3 weeks. Most of them were tired and wanted to go home themselves. This fatigue on the battlefield may have slowed them down, giving the English and French a fighting chance if the Navy didn't show up in time. While the Germans would likely still be victorious, it may have taken them longer than estimated to decimate the BEF, buying Britain time to rescue some manpower. What would have happened in England? The debate as to what would have gone down had the English lost their army is complex. There are many who believe that England would have either surrendered or negotiated with Hitler. Others argue that Great Britain would have stayed in the fight. Winston Churchill still delivers the now legendary "We shall fight them on the beaches" speech, which unites all of Great Britain in the face of tyranny, despite so many of his fellow politicians being against him. Lord Halifax, who had turned down the position of Prime Minister in favour of Churchill, was pushing Parliament to seek negotiations with Germany. He was overruled by Churchill, who knew that any peace treaty made with Hitler or Mussolini would eventually be violated. Let's say British forces were wiped out at Dunkirk. England would still have been able to defend itself. That's not to say that the loss of the BEF wouldn't be felt. It would have decreased their chances of future victory upon returning to the European mainland. But remember, the island of Great Britain still had the Royal Navy and Air Force on its side, which is what stopped the Nazis from setting foot on their soil. The Battle of Britain began in July of 1940. By now, France had already surrendered to Germany, leaving Britain to fight on their own. The Soviets would not join the Allies until summer of 1941, with the Americans declaring war after Pearl Harbor. From our point of view, it would seem like a lost cause, but the Brits are determined. The battle is fought by both air and sea, with the Luftwaffe conducting night raids that kill over 20,000 civilians. This loss is used as fuel to drive Britain to victory. In an alternate timeline, Britain still manages to fight off the Germans, showing them no mercy and stopping an invasion. But what if the Germans did manage to invade? This is where it gets much trickier. With most of the BEF killed at Dunkirk, the British would have a harder time pushing the Germans out. Not only is most of their manpower gone, most of their equipment is also. The British were forced to leave thousands of tons of artillery, vehicles, and ammunition on the shores of Dunkirk. They were too focused on moving the army out. So with the Germans' Operation Sea Lion succeeding, and the enemy making it ashore, the Royal Air Force is their best bet now. They're better equipped to take down enemy bombers, along with aircraft carrying paratroopers. While there are still ground troops and reserves on hand, it will take years for the British to rebuild their army to what it once was. Out of desperation, the military conscripts men from other services to fight on the front lines. During this time, coastal towns are evacuated along with nearby cities. Thousands of Brits are forced to move further inland as the enemy draws closer. Bombing raids are still conducted. With British defences wearing thin, the Luftwaffe is perhaps able to conduct more bombings during the day rather than just at night. This allows them to cripple the British before infantry moves in on new territory. Nevertheless, Britain's still determined to stay in the fight, at least as long as Winston Churchill has something to say about it. As the great leader said in his famous June 4th speech, "Never surrender." This meant that Britain was to fight until the bitter end, even with German victory being inevitable. Luckily, the evacuation of Dunkirk was successful. Otherwise, this alternate timeline would have become a reality. As for what may have happened later in the war, that's for another video. Let's just say things would have been much different had Operation Dynamo failed. History is full of fascinating events. Here to learn more? Let's keep your curiosity going with a couple more videos, shall we? Here's what you need to know. Check out the unsolved mysteries of human sacrifices found over 1,000 years ago. Or how about the 6 boys who survived 15 months on a remote island? Go ahead, click one, or better yet, watch both and learn more about the history of the world. Which historical what if would you like to see us talk about next? Let us know in the comments below.